of the biggest challenges facing this country and the region. In today's program, we analyze the announcement by the Ecuadorian government that it will receive another billionaire disbursement from international financial organizations. The criticism comes as these apparently positive acts lead to strong austerity measures in the country, including job losses, less investment in social programs, and even a loss in sovereignty. Today, we have economist Jonathan Báez to shed a light on this issue. But first, let's take a look at this video.
Finance Minister Richard Martinez announced that Ecuador will receive $1.5 billion in loans from several multilateral bodies, including the IMF, in the coming days. According to Martinez, the loans will be used for the government's proposed labor reforms, which will provide new opportunities to all Ecuadorians. Recently, the government announced labor reforms related to special contracts for new business, fixed-term contracts, and new regulations for the working week. However, despite protest action taken by several workers' unions against these reforms, the finance minister said the government is protecting the rights of Ecuadorian workers.
No economic policy, nothing that has been reported has been enforced. Analysts have revealed that the proposed government reforms do not focus on issues such as employment or the private sector's contribution to income tax. These laws are to the benefit of the companies as opposed to workers. In fact, business owners are paying less taxes.
Several local polling companies, such as Opinion Profiles, recently published reports which indicate that Moreno's credibility has decreased from 85% in July 2017 to 24% in April 2019. Denise Herrera, teleSUR, Ecuador.
So thank you for being with us, Jonathan. So first, let's look at how much money Ecuador is now owing these international financial organizations and how long it will take us to repay that.
Gracias por la invitación,
thank you for your invitation.
Por estar aquí nuevamente. Para nosotros es un gusto
For
nuevamente
us,
compartir con ustedes las
it's an honor
investigaciones que hemos realizado en la
to share
Facultad
with
de
you the
Economía de la Universidad
investigations
Central.
that we carry out.
Te comento, antes de llegar a ese momento,
Before
quisiera
this
hacer
moment,
una pequeña introducción de
I would
cómo
like
es
to
que
make an
llegamos a los
introduction
acuerdos
of
con
how we
no
reached
solo
the
el
agreements,
FMI, sino
not
con
only
otros
with the
organismos
IMF,
internacionales.
but with
Y
other
ahí hay
international
que ser muy claro
organisms.
en que el prisma
We have to
fue,
be very clear
cómo las élites
that how
económicas y empresariales
the
de alguna
economic
manera
elite
capturaron
in
las
some
decisiones
way
públicas. Es
pushed
decir, figuras
the
claves
government,
del sector
the
empresarial
government
de alto
decisions.
sector empresarial terminaron en puestos de decisión importantes.
This is how
Desde el
the high
principio del
authorities
gobierno, pero después de
belong
todo
to the
se
company
más
sector.
marcado cuando entró el ministro de Economía y
Then
Finanzas, que provenía
our
del
minister,
Comité Empresarial Ecuatoriano.
he came from the
Entonces,
Chamber
ahí
of
ya
Commerce.
se logró ver cómo la política
Then
económica
it was
iba
very
en un
clear to
giro
see that there was a
totalmente
shift
empresarial, ¿no? Pero eso
to a
tiene una serie de
commercial
implicaciones. Y la más
sense.
importante es entender
This had
que
two
la administración
implications,
pública
that
es
the
lo mismo que una
public
administración
administration
privada que una administración empresarial
is
por
just
fuera.
like a
Y esto plantea
private
una serie de problemas.
administration,
En
and
medio
this
de todos estos
sets
procesos,
some
se
complexity.
implementaron para mí los
So
dos
some,
mayores, procesos que
so two
muestran
major
cómo
processes
la
were
captura de la
implemented
acción pública por este sector
that
corporativo y
reflects
empresarial
how
y empresarial
the companies are
tiene
really
repercusiones en la
commanding
economía
the
nacional.
government decisions.
El primero es la Ley de Fomento Productivo,
The first
que
is the
implicaba una
promotion
remisión
of
de
production,
intereses y multas por concepto de tributos,
which
y el otro es el
established
acuerdo con, distinguidos
forgiving
el más
taxes.
importante de ellos con el FMI.
The most important was with the IMF.
En un momento, la economía ecuatoriana
At some point, the
se dijo que
Ecuadorian
estaba en un
economy
momento demasiado complejo, ¿no? Que la
said that
deuda
there was
era
a,
exorbitante. Sin
in a
embargo,
complex situation,
en
that we owed too much
datos del
money.
FMI se estableció que la
However,
deuda
according to
en
the
relación al
IMF,
PIB apenas alcanzaba el 43.2% en el 2016. 2017
we owe 43%
y se estima que en
of the
2018 subió al 44%.
compare the
Entonces, la
GDP
economía como tal
with
no
the
estaba
income.
en una situación tan precaria como
So
nos
it wasn't
pensaba.
such a bad
Entonces,
situation
de
as we
alguna manera
thought.
querían legitimar que la economía estaba endeudada, estaba mal.
What they wanted to
Eso requería de
legitimize
un organismo internacional
is
que
that
nos
we were
permitiera
in a bad
solventar
situation and that we
ese bache
needed to
económico,
go
ese
to
déficit que
institutions
estábamos.
of international institutions.
Ante eso se dijo y se contrastó
Faced with
que
this,
el problema de los impuestos.
they said that the
El tema de los
taxes
impuestos
were
se
the
convirtió
problems.
como en el eje
So the taxes become
de
the axis
batalla o de disputa de parte de las cámaras y las élites
on behalf of the
y las élites empresariales
elites.
introducidas tomando decisiones públicas.
And bear in mind
Finalmente determinaron que
that they
la
were
ley de
also
fomento
now
productivo
authorities
se
in the
implementó en
government.
decreto oficial en agosto de 2018
And then they took us to an agreement with the IMF. Why the remission of taxes? Because on one side, the income, one side, petroleum, and then it came down to 12%. For each barrel, we only have 12 cents now. So that decreases the income. And the second one is taxes once again. If we have a problem of deficit and the problem is income, so what you do is go charge the people who owe you. With that, you cut both your incomes. So therefore, it would justify that you have to knock the door of international organisms. So the great problem was that the remission came and that the letter was signed, and we ended up with these international organisms being really close to us. It is estimated. The arrival of the loans is like 10,000 million, which is a number that we could have overcome. Now we have 10,000 million in debt and bring lots of repercussion. One is the labor reform, tax reform, and the IMF is designing the lines along this will go. What they say is that IMF is that we should improve the tax, the sales tax. And we also have to elevate the people with less income will now have to pay taxes. And they will not go to more progressive taxes. Another problem that's happening is with the tax of the leaving of capitals. It's complicated because the letter that's signed with the IMF, it is established that this tax is not good. However, what it allows is for capitals to stay in the country. And what they allow is some people to take their capital outside and generate a lack of mobility here in Ecuador. When we see the letter, IMF, not even they say that the taking out of capitals is bad. What they say is, in this context, this may not be a good moment to eliminate this tax. And plans should be made to eliminate it once the reserve is strengthened. There we see not even the IMF can say that this tax should leave.
It's saying one thing, and the government is saying another thing to the public. The government kept saying that we needed this disbursement from the IMF, that we needed to make people that earn more pay more taxes, and it seems that it's the other way around.
Exactly. That's what's happening. The inverse is happening. The law of economic promotion was said that was aimed at people that had taxes, that had too much taxes and couldn't pay, and they were going to receive remissions. However, we've been able to investigate so that economic groups, they're like groups of companies. It's not the same as an individual who has a little company, and it's different from a group of companies that is from 30 companies up. What we found is that the debt of the economical group is more than 2,000 million. This is to 2018. Then we see to February 2019, it goes up to $720 million. What they said is that there was a time limit until December. So what we see is that the economic groups received a great deduction in their loans, in their debts. it is established that the economic groups had paid $800 million, but they had asked for remission of $900 million. This means that the government is even losing more. So the remission of taxes was not established for the small people who owned money and people who were not able to pay their taxes. This was to help the powerful groups, the elites, to be benefited from taxes that they should have paid. There are two types of taxes, one that are still pending and the other ones that are solid. And before this, these groups benefited from both of these types of taxes. So we think, was it necessary to reach an agreement with the IMF? And was it necessary to go to these groups? Or we could have just charged the people who owed money to the government. To 27th of March, you can say that there's still a group of people who owed money, of these economical groups. So some groups didn't take this advantage. And they're taking these taxes to court to see if they're not going to pay them at all. So this doesn't speak well of the government and their action on how to recover the taxes that are owed.
That was said during the agreement with the IMF, with the World Bank, because it's different disbursements, not just from the IMF. It's different organizations that keep paying for this agreement with the Ecuadorian state. But it seems that if we keep continuing to do that, it will come into some sort of loss of sovereignty, because it will be an international organization telling the country what it needs to do on top and leaving aside the wishes and demands of the poor classes, of the working classes.
Totally. In fact, we have to be very clear what the IMF represents. The decade of the 80s and 90s was a total sack of the income that the government had to send them to the payment of the loans. But this is a subordination. This is a subordination to the international elites. This leaves Ecuador in a position, a very worrisome situation, because you're not thinking of the well-being of the people, of the lower class, but also you're not thinking of the national economy as a whole. We're thinking of that the private sector is working inside from the government. It's the BID, the International Development Bank, CAF. There are several international organisms, but especially the IMF, because they conduct the national economy. They have a way to compromise the government to do things. There are some pivotal points, but before that, about the subordination. Ani Banova, who's a representative to Ecuador, says, when we read the complete letter that is not published in Spanish, although it should be, it says in a section that the Ecuadorian economy will decrease. We thought we were going to grow from 1 to 1.4. But once the agreement starts in 2019, is not positive, it's going to be negative. When we ask the representative, she said, inevitably, there will be some consequences on the growth, but but it will improve the government as a whole. The program will help the climate of investment and the reduction of the risk, of the investment risk. There we see how the foreign investors will come. And what it shows is that the government will try to do everything in its hand to guarantee the foreign investors to get money in our country. The IMF is very clear. It's not here to improve the Ecuador economy or the social sector.
But how do you explain that?
How do you?
They keep saying that, but the government, the government of Lenín Moreno, kept saying that this will bring liquidity to our system. It will fill our monetary reserves, and it will hold up the social investments and give us the credibility that we so long needed.
Behind this, there's this thought that the investment, the foreign investment, will allow an economy to be healthy. When we observe that the relationship, everything that he's done have been positive to attract foreign investment. It's a high number, but let's think if this is going to help the internal economy. In fact, if you observe that from 2018 that we fell in default, it's because we didn't want to pay something that was not legitimate. So the IMF just wants to wash their face, and what they want to show is that we're going to do everything that we have to do to improve our image. In that sense, is that it's that we decide to go to the international organisms. And once again, we think that the private sector is totally clean and owes nothing to society. But on the contrary, they're the ones that can help us. Let's not forget that not paying taxes is just as corrupt as any other illegitimate action. So to this we must add that if we do a correlationship on how the poverty has increased and diminished, the foreign investment has gone up, but poverty has also gone up. This indicates that the foreign investment does not benefit the people of a country. It benefits a certain sector, but this does not reflect on the rest of the society. So this is complicated because for the small companies, they're expecting that these investments might boost the economy. However, the investments are done with people who are getting to know each other. So it's very complicated that a small company might be able to insert themselves in this big scheme. So it's very complicated to say that the IMF comes to give us this.
Disbursement of the first millions that came to Ecuador, we just saw the gas prices going up. We saw layoffs in the public sector, thousands of people being laid off in the public sector. So if that happened with the first disbursement, what's going to happen with this one?
Well, we would have to say that we don't know. It's not clear where the resources that are going to come, where they're going to go. We don't know where it's going to be invested. You would think it would be health and education. However, the president said that we have to focalize who's going to receive breakfasts. This puts us in a very complex situation. The layoff is also very complex for the families. So the public layoffs is also going to affect IES, the Social Security. It is known that Social Security does not have a good situation. However, we must take in mind that if you lay off people that are putting money in Social Security, of course, this will not allow the Social Security to grow. So you've got people that need this attention but cannot obtain it. So it's not only a problem for families. There are families who are not going to have an income, but also this have a repercussion in the national economy. So we must bear in mind that these credits, how good are they going to be if you're going to have a society who cannot pay things? The fundamental point, on one hand, the tax of the capitals that are leaving and the work reform. The work reform says that you can work 40 hours, but in more days. And what's behind this is that you work for more hours, but without getting extra pay. They're just going to be normal hours. So you can see how there's a series of measures that try to diminish the work value. They're speaking about flexibilizing the work. It's important to say that in Ecuador, flexibilization was eliminated in 2008 with Mandate 8. This is very interesting. We saw it in the press. Businessmen are saying that there might be more layoffs if we take away third people working. What we saw is that unemployment decreased. In fact, unemployment was lower before we had the letter of agreement than after. What they want is that we give the best options for investors. We can also observe another worrisome situation is that in March 2019, it was determined that the adequate work had diminished. And that meant that there was an alert to this reform. However, the chambers of commerce answered that there were contracts that were too rigid. It was very complicated to hire people, and therefore they needed to flexibilize. But what is this in the end? That you have to lower the standards of a worker, diminish vacation, not pay Social Security. So what we've seen is that flexibilization is not the option. IDB established how much it costs to hire a worker. What we saw with comparable values is that to hire somebody outside the law, it's 37% in Ecuador, which is below the average, which is 41%. And in a 20-country ranking, Ecuador is not among the first. So that is not feasible. What they're saying is not true.
So it shows the importance of transparency when we're talking about these issues. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, Jonathan, but thank you very much for your time, for explaining to us very carefully and with all the digits that we needed. Thank you. So we've been talking to economist Jonathan Báez on what the future may bring if Ecuador continues to plunge deeper into debt with international organizations and what that might mean for the social well-being of its citizens. Thank you for watching. This is Interviews from Quito. I'm Carla González. Until next time.
teleSUR Documentaries presents